Leviathan, chapter 39. "Off your bums, beasties!" Darren shouted, sending another cluster of bats fluttering into the air. Mr. Rigby had sent the middies forward to lighten the bow. Something heavy was holding the airship's nose down. Either that or the forward hydrogen cells were leaking like mad, but the sniffers hadn't found a slightest rip. From up here, Darren could see the whole valley, and the view of Barking Dire. The clanker walking machine had come to a halt a few miles away. Its scouts stretched in a line across the glacier, waiting for the airship to fly into their guns. Suddenly the membrane reared beneath Darren's feet. The nose had tipped up a bit. Did you feel that?" Newkirk yelled from across the bow. "Something's working," she called back, keep rousting the beasties." Darren unclipped her safety line and ran toward another cluster of bats, shouting and waving her arms. They turned to stare at her skeptically before scampering. They hadn't been fed their fletchets yet, and they wouldn't be any time soon. When the ballast alert had sounded, Mr. Rigby had tossed 2 whole bags of spikes over the side. If the Zeppelins caught up, the Leviathan would be defenseless. Her flocks stuffed with plenty of food, but no metal, and now scattered to the winds. At least the borrowed clanker engines were working so far. They were noisy and smelly and threw out enough sparks to give Darren a mortal shivers, but blisters could they push the ship along. The old motivator engines had only nudged the air beast in the right direction, like a plowman flicking a donkey's ears. But now that was upside down. The cilia were acting like a rudder, thus setting the course while the clanker engines propelled the ship. Darren hadn't realized the whale could be such clever boots, adopting to the new engines so quickly, and she'd never seen an airship move this fast. Pursuing Zeppelins, some of them small, nippy interceptors, were already falling behind, but the German land machines still waited, dead ahead. The ship bucked again, and Darren lost her footing, skidding down the slope, her foot caught in a rat line, jerking her to a nasty halt. "Safety first, Mr. Sharp," Newkirk called, snapping the shoulder straps of his harness like suspenders. "Pretty smug for a bum rag," Darren muttered, snapping her clip back into the rat line. She gave the bat another half-hearted shout, but the ship hadn't seemed to need it anymore. The air beast's nose was pulled up in starts, another jolt skyward coming every 10 seconds or so. It felt as if they were clunking officers out of the bridge's front window. But at least the ship was climbing. Darren eased forward a bit until she could. She had a good view of the Germans, the little scout craft, skittering machines like metal, daddy long legs, were shooting off their mortar. But the barrage was only flares, which weren't designed to climb very high. They arced a few hundred feet up and burned there uselessly, singeing the air beneath the gondola belly. But now the big 8-legged walkers' guns were elevating, tracking the airship, but holding their fire. At the speed the Leviathan was making, they'd only get one shot before she flew past them. A command whistle began to scream, one long note pitched almost too high to hear. The all-hands aft signal. Darren turned and ran. On either side of her, sniffers scuttled along the membrane, headed toward the tail. The spine was crowded with men and beasts, all running in the same direction, the air gun crews pulling up their weapons to carry them along. It was a last desperate attempt to move every squawk of weight to the rear of the ship. Not done all at once, it would tip the ship's nose up, driving her still higher into the air. Halfway back, Darren saw flickers on the snow below and glanced over her shoulder. The muzzlers of the walkers' guns were blazing, smoke billowing out in clouds. Before the rumble even reached her ears, the airship buckled again, harder this time, as if someone had tossed a grand piano overboard. The nose flew up, hiding Darren's view of the German walker, and the deck roared hard to starboard. Whatever they tossed away, it had been on the port side. She heard the tardy thunder of guns then, and shells started arching back past. They were huge incendiaries, igniting the sky like gout of frozen lightning. One flew past so near that Darren felt its heart on her cheeks and forehead, its heat on her cheeks and forehead. The air was instantly burned dry, her eyes forced, half shut by the shell's fury. The light from the flaming missiles through the shadows of men and beasts across the membrane stretched the mishap happened in the air, by the airship's curves. But the entire barrage was flying too far to port. The sudden loss of weight, whatever it had been, had rolled the airship out of the way just in time, and the rigor work over the last few days had held not a squawk of hydrogen was flaring from the skin. But Darren kept running for the ship's tail, as did the rest of the top crew, not just to pull the ship up harder, but to see behind them. There it was again, the eight-legged walker, now sliding into the distant astern. Its guns were shrilling, trying to spin around and fire once more, but the Leviathan's new clanker engines were carrying her away too fast. By the time the guns blazed again, the burning shells fell hundreds of feet short. They dropped into the snow and expended their anger there. The walking machines vanished behind the veil of steam. Darren joined the cheer that rose up along the spine. The hydrogen sniffers howled along, half mad from all of the ruckus. Newkirk appeared, panting and covered with sweat, and clapped her on the shoulder. "Blistering good fight, eh, Mr. Sharp?" "Eh, it was. I just hope it's over." She raised her field glasses to gander at the Zeppelins, now silhouetted by the setting sun. They'd fallen still farther behind, hopelessly outmatched by the Stormwalker's engines. "They'll never catch up now," she said, "not with night falling." The Hercules shells go wild. "But I thought those Predators were fast." "Ah, they were, but we're faster now that we've got those engines on us." "But haven't they got clanker engines too?" Newkirk asked. Darren frowned, looking down at the Leviathan's flanks. The cilia were stirring madly, waving the air airflow around the ship, somehow adding the currents of the sky to the raw power of the engines. "We're something different now," she said, "a little of us and a little of them." Newkirk thought a moment, then humphed and clapped her on the back again. "Well, frankly, Mr. Sharp, I don't care if the Kaiser himself gives us a push, as long as it gets us clear of this iceberg." "Glacier," Darren said. "But you're right. It's good to be flying again." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath of freezing air, feeling the strange new thrum of the membrane beneath her boots. Already her air sense told her the beast was veering south, setting course for the Mediterranean. The zip lines behind were an afterthought. The Ottoman Empire lay ahead. Whatever sort of tangled crossbreed the clankers had made her into, the Leviathan had survived.